continuing our coverage on site here at Netroots Nation 2018 in New Orleans. And joining us now, and once again, he's been on the program before, is Joe Dinkin. Joe is the National Campaigns Director for the Working Families Party. And since the Working Families Party has been involved in some very interesting races already this year, we thought it would be great to have Joe come back and talk to us. So first of all, Joe, thanks for coming back on the program.
Thanks for having me on the show. I always enjoy getting the chance to talk to you here.
Well, we always enjoy the chance to have you, and you guys are always doing interesting stuff. So let's start with a general question. It seems to me that the Democratic Party right now is in the process of redefining itself, a process of potential change, transformation. There are a lot of debates going on, a lot of new young candidates, a lot of candidates coming in from the left. So it seems to me this is a party in the process of transformation. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, I look at it a little bit differently. I think the Democratic Party is undergoing some shifts, and I see that as coming from, it's an institution that needs to respond to what's actually happening on the ground. And what's happening on the ground is, especially in the age of Trump, there's a whole new generation of people who want to get involved. There's, what I would almost describe as a really unprecedented revival of kind of grassroots democracy. People with a ton of leadership and a ton of skill and a ton of, personal capacity are, realizing that there's almost nothing more important that you can do right now than to kind of relearn the skills of civic engagement and democracy. People are getting more involved, people are knocking on doors, people are running for office for the first time. Many of them people who are connected to, more connected to the grassroots social movements and progressive organizations than to the traditional structures of the Democratic Party. And I think the party itself is having to respond to that. For me, I've always seen the Democratic Party as not really one thing, but kind of a field of contest, where it's a little bit of an institution that is, in some sense, divided between a set of very progressive voters and a set of donors who are not always in support of some of the most kind of muscular and full-throated and, to use a little bit of a buzzword, redistributionist or democratic socialist of the policies that grassroots base wants to see. So the Democratic Party, in America today, when you ask people, when you survey people, what does the Democratic Party stand for? The biggest answer is people don't know. And the reason is because of that internal conflict. And we're seeing more and more as more of that energy and grassroots activism comes in, not just to groups like WFP, but to a whole range of groups that are, getting involved in politics or growing their membership from, the Democratic Socialists of America to Indivisible to many others. The party itself is having to respond to that.
Yeah, I love your description of the Democratic Party as a field of, I forget what you called it.
A field of contest.
A field of contest. Yeah, I think that's very true because, I think it often gets framed in the kind of circles you and I travel in, from political activists and so on. It all, and in my case, punditry too, or whatever. But it often gets framed as the sort of cliche, the Bernie lefties. And I worked for Bernie, so I'm close to that team. But and the Hillary mainstream folks. But in terms of voters, I'm not sure that's a real thing. I feel as if it's more the nature of the appeals being made by the candidates based on their funding sources and their philosophy of politics. I don't know if I'm off base with. Does that make any sense to you at all?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think that people are seeing the Democratic Party. I mean, for anybody with any sense looking at America today, getting involved in politics through the party of Trump is not something that makes sense to most people with any kind of sensible view of sort of progressive values. And so people get involved in the Democratic Party because that's where the action is. That's where you can have a path that doesn't require being sort of associated with that. But it is a sort of wide open terrain where there are people with all kinds of different views contesting for power in different ways. And there's been this great surge of people coming from a kind of viewpoint of that we need to make an America that works for everybody, that we need a society that is really rooted in, dignity for all people and rooted in solidarity, and people who are seeking to, again, especially in the age of Trump, make change in America that really meets the scale of the problems that we're facing, from, deepening economic inequality to, persistent structural racism, to climate change, to, a really fragile, in some senses, democracy. And I think when you're seeing candidates put forward the kind of bold and visionary platforms on those issues, it's because the demand for those issues is coming from the grassroots base.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I've written a lot about the polling of the Democratic base and of all voters, especially younger voters. And one thing that struck me, and I'm sure you saw it, was a Harvard-Harris poll a few months ago that showed that a majority of all Democratic voters, a slim majority, but a majority, agreed with the statement that they supported movements to move the party to the left and produce new leaders. The 52% of Democrats of all kinds supported that. And this whole notion of, well, but those are the Bernie-crats or whatever, they don't care about, that's not true. 65% of African Americans, 65% of Hispanic voters, much more women than men, much more people of color than white folks. So, and then if you look at 30 and under, 40 and under, we're obviously looking at...
The numbers are even more.
Yeah, and a very different view.
I think that's where the future is.
Yeah. So I guess the question then is, if the Democratic Party is the field of conquest, I see two scenarios, but I'm curious about yours. Scenario number one is the forces of change succeed, Democratic Party contests the Republicans, things get better. Scenario number two, the forces of change fail, which I consider a possibility, in which case the Democratic Party stays more or less what it is now, and we, in essence, become a 1.5 party country, and things go to hell in a handbasket. Those are my two visions. I don't know. What are yours?
Yeah, I guess I would say that for the elites and leadership, they have to respond to the changes that are coming from the grassroots base, from the kinds of demands that you're talking about, from the kind of diverse set of young people and people of color and people of all stripes who are demanding this kind of transformative change. They have to respond to that demand or else get out of the way.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And now let's talk a little bit about the Working Families Party. And again, we're talking with Joe Dinkin, National Campaigns Manager for the Working Families Party. You're a multi-state party, and people should know that. But you started in New York, and perhaps your greatest influence is in New York. So let's look at New York for a second. The big race there, big excitement there right now of upcoming races is of course Cynthia Nixon, right?
Sure.
And you guys are supporting Cynthia.
That's right. We've been with her right from the beginning.
Yeah. How's that looking right now, first of all?
I think she has an incredible energy behind her, and I think she's electrifying voters and electrifying activists around really a central message of transforming our state to work for the many, and of the main thing that she's been talking about on the campaign trail has been shifting our state's resources from incarceration to education, campaigning on schools, not jails. Cynthia is somebody who's been an education advocate and activist for almost 20 years, even using the height of her celebrity when she was on Sex and the City to get arrested in front of a school protesting Bloomberg-era cuts to the schools.
Yeah.
And she has been a really powerful voice in New York on issues of not just education funding, but education equity, and demanding the resources from the state that a lawsuit, several years ago demanded to fund underfunded and mostly of color school districts that still has never been implemented by the Cuomo administration. So that's been a central focus of her campaign, to shift from jails to schools, from incarceration to education. She's also been railing on a broken, pay-to-play political culture in Albany, and a broken MTA to boot, a failing subway system suffering from underinvestment. And I think I think Andrew Cuomo's solution is basically to privatize Penn Station even more and let the developers take it over.
So I won't ask you to respond to this statement, but when I think about all the things that I think are broken and wrong and even dislikable about the Democratic Party establishment, I think of Andrew Cuomo.
Oh, I'm happy to respond to that.
Okay.
That's a full-throated agreement. I think he's the exact kind of person that leaves people not sure what the Democratic Party stands for. I mean, this is a guy who's taken more money than any Democrat in America from the Koch brothers. He's taken, I don't know, $80,000 from the Koch brothers. He's taken money from Donald Trump, from his disgraced former communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, from Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and those are just the names you've heard about, from any number of real estate and Wall Street bigwigs. The place where they're putting their money in New York politics isn't into the Republican Party, it's Andrew Cuomo, because that's where they know that they can get their needs and their demands taken care of.
It's going to be a great day for New York and America when Andrew Cuomo is defeated by Cynthia Nixon. That's my personal feeling. And now, I guess the last set of conversations I would have with you is kind of tactical, okay? And it goes, because obviously we're like in complete philosophical agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a given. So, and it's this, and it's complicated. There's all this confusion about Joe Crowley being on your party line, and he doesn't want to back off now that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has won, and she's great, and we all love her. I know you guys love her too. And but what I'm seeing, my personal perception, is that we're seeing a lot of establishment Democrats. Is Cory Booker still standing? We're seeing a lot of establishment Democrats now embracing Medicare for all, and embracing other progressive ideas. Crowley said he, signed on to Medicare for all, writing a piece about a new drug bill that Lloyd Doggett introduced, and Tim Ryan is a co-sponsor, right? So we're seeing this shift, and I guess the question for those of us who are not just progressives, but progressives working in the field of contest is, what do we do to be as right as we can, knowing that we were between encouraging that move in the right direction by establishment politicians versus just getting rid of them, getting new guys?
Yeah, I think it's about organizing and about accountability. I mean, from my point of view, we can never actually know what's in somebody's heart. We just can know how the forces of society and how they act under pressure. And so what people are acting under pressure now, when candidates who've never supported anything as bold as Medicare for All are coming out for it, it's because they know that's where their voters are. And in coming out for an issue like that, they're making a promise. And there's nothing voters hate more than somebody who breaks a promise to them. So somebody who campaigns on Medicare for All, they can buy themselves another term by doing it. They can get reelected. They can get support from some progressives, or even a lot of progressives, even if they've never supported it before. But they're, in a sense, making a commitment to actually follow through on it. And when those bills get, introduced, when they're not there as co-sponsor, people are going to start asking why if they're not. When a vote comes to committee, if they vote against it, people are going to start asking why. And so it's really about organizing and accountability, because if we can raise the bar on what we expect of these leaders, how we expect them to deliver for us, then we can make demands that they do it, or have accountability when they don't. So that's how I think about it.
So what are you guys, a good answer, what are you guys, I see part of the role of the rest of us is making sure that when they run on Medicare for All, that they don't sign a bill that's Medicare for everyone, or Medicare for almost all. They'll be looking for the off-ramps, some of them, and some of us have to hold their feet to the fire. But, so what, besides Cynthia Nixon, what are you guys concentrating on in the next cycle?
So there's a lot of incredible primary races yet still to come. There are candidates like Kerry Harris running for U.S. Senate in Delaware. There are candidates like Abdul El-Sayed, who could be the first ever Muslim governor, who's running in a Democratic primary that's coming up this Tuesday in Michigan, first Arab American governor. There are primaries in places like Connecticut, where Jahana Hayes is a Teacher of the Year in Connecticut, running in an open congressional seat in the Democratic primary. So there's any number of really exciting primaries still coming up. And then there are general elections where, we, along with every other left of David Frum person in America wants to end the Trump majority in Congress, end the Republican majority in state houses. What we're going to be working hardest on is to help elect many of the progressives who won contested and tough primaries, help them come through in their general elections too. So that means people like Ben Jealous in Maryland, incredible progressive leader, served as the national president of the NAACP, storied civil rights activist, won a Democratic primary for governor of Maryland. Now some of the establishment wing of the Democratic Party in Maryland are breaking from him and saying they'd rather keep Hogan than let the Republican Governor Hogan than let Ben Jealous, the movement progressive, get elected. And so it's going to be up to people like us to do the work to help make sure that people like Ben Jealous, people like Dana Bolter in upstate New York, people who have kind of run on this progressive set of values, Kara Eastman in Nebraska, all over the country, up and down the ballot, make sure that those people actually are able to get into government and shape the terrain of what comes next.
Great. Well, where can people go to find out more about the Working Families Party?
So people who want to get involved, who want to become a member, but make a donation, just check out who we've endorsed, or even think about running for office themselves, can find more information at our website at workingfamilies.org. And I'd also encourage people who want to keep posted on what we're doing to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
All right, great. Joe Dinkin, National Campaigns Director for the Working Families Party. Thanks for great work, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks so much for having me on.